What's going on, guys? The Comics Kid 2099 here, and I am here once again to examine an issue of the X-Men. Today, I'm going to be examining X-Men issue 7, written by Stan Lee, with pencils by Jack Kirby, inks by Chick Stone, and lettering by Art Simek. We've had the last few issues have been lettered by Sam Rosen, but Art Simek is back on lettering duties. And this issue begins with the X-Men graduating. They are taking a graduation photo, and Professor X, he hinted that they were done with their tests, that they were done being his students a few issues ago, and now he tells them that since they are no longer his students, he is going to leave them. And he doesn't tell them where he's going, but he leaves Cyclops in charge, and he shows Cyclops Cerebro. This is the first time that we see Cerebro, and it's very different than how it's been portrayed in all non-comics media. Instead of it being an amplifier for telepaths, it's actually the opposite. Cyclops says, "You're a telepath. You don't need a machine like this to sense other mutants." And he says, "That's right, but a non-telepath would need Cerebro." And I'm pretty sure that that's how Cerebro works, at least up until the 1980s. I remember during Claremont's era in the 80s that Shadowcat was fixing Cerebro so that other people could have like little miniature Cerebro units to track mutants, and it was people who were not telepathic. And so that's kind of how Cerebro is going to work for a while. I believe it's not until the movie comes out that they kind of change the way that Cerebro works in the comics. But this is the first time that we get to see Cerebro, and Professor X, he leaves the school, and he doesn't tell anyone where he's going. He just says he has some business that he needs to attend to. And meanwhile, Magneto, he goes to the circus and finds the Blob, who, when we last saw him, Professor X had mind-wiped him so that he did not remember the X-Men telling him that he was a mutant and trying to recruit him. And Magneto, he basically does the same thing. He tries to recruit the Blob isn't interested, and then suddenly the Blob remembers everything that Professor X took away from his brain, and then he says he will join Magneto to get revenge on the X-Men. So Magneto, he sends out a call to the X-Men to meet him at a certain location where they will fight each other. And then Cyclops, he becomes General Patton, and he rallies the troops who are all at a coffee shop, and we will see quite a bit of this coffee shop in the first 66 issues of the X-Men. This is the first time that we see this shop, and there are a whole bunch of beatniks who are there, and let's be honest, Stan Lee apparently did not think very highly of beatniks because he treats all of these guys like idiots, and so do all of the X-Men, which begs the question, what are they even doing at this coffee shop if they don't like beatniks? But anyway, they leave the shop, and then they go to fight the Brotherhood. We have a pretty typical fight with the Brotherhood, and then Magneto tries to kill all of the X-Men with a missile, but Blob is standing in the way, and Blob realizes that Magneto doesn't care about him. The Brotherhood, they all retreat, and Blob kind of goes off doing his lonely man impression, and he goes back to the circus where he feels like that's the only place that he fits in, and then the X-Men count this one as a win. And this is better than last issue, where I wasn't really impressed with Magneto trying to recruit Namor into the Brotherhood. I feel like this actually progresses things quite a bit. We get to see Professor Xavier leave, and we don't know where he's going. That's going to be kind of an ongoing subplot for a couple of issues. We will see that kind of come to fruition about 3 issues down the line, I want to say. But that's going to be kind of the first ongoing subplot that we will see in this series. And we also get to see Cyclops officially become the field leader. We haven't really gotten to see a whole lot of that in this series. I feel like we got to see some of that in issue 1, but even now I'm kind of second guessing if we actually got to see any of that, or if that was just me putting what we know of the X-Men in the present day into my reading of that issue. If I go back and reread issue 1, I'm not sure if Cyclops was actually leading the team. He was the one who was kind of advocating that the X-Men go in and try and stop Magneto for the General. He was the one who kind of said, give us 10 minutes and see if we can handle this. But I don't know if he was really leading the team per se, since Professor Xavier was there with them mentally. But this is officially the first time that Cyclops is leading the team, and he even tells Professor X, he says, I'm not your best choice for leader. He says Beast is more book smart and Angel is more aggressive, which is funny because we have seen Angel show aggressiveness, I think, one time in this entire series so far, and it was when he basically threw Jean over his shoulder and said, you're going to help me find the Blob, and she didn't really want to go with him. She wanted to go with Cyclops. That was, I think, the closest to being aggressive that we've seen the Angel. Other than that, he's just as passive as everyone else in this team, but it's interesting interesting that Cyclops does not think that he is leadership material. We're getting to see a lot of his self-confidence issues that he is very well known for in later years. We're getting to see a lot of that show up here. We're starting to see that Cyclops is kind of the most well-rounded out of all of the X-Men. He doesn't like his powers, which admittedly Beast doesn't either. We've seen that a few issues ago. But he thinks his powers are a curse and a danger to those around him, and that's why he doesn't really like getting close to people, because he's afraid that he will hurt them. And now we also see that he doesn't really think much of himself as a leader. He didn't think that he would make a good leader, but Professor X says, no, you are the best choice, and he says, I'm not taking no for an answer. And Cyclops also tells the X-Men that he was planning on quitting the team. That's something he kind of just drops on them and says, but I'm here now. So not something you want to hear from your brand new leader, that he was actually planning on leaving, but it's interesting that Professor X apparently didn't know that Cyclops was leaving, or if he did, he didn't really care. He said, you know, you're going to be my leader anyway, my stand-in leader, rather. Other than that, we get the introduction of Cerebro here. We get Magneto trying to recruit another mutant into the Brotherhood, and it doesn't really work out for him. I have to say, Magneto, he could probably do a lot better if he was just a smidge nicer to his current Brotherhood and also anyone else that he's trying to recruit. You can... what's the saying about flies and vinegar and honey? I don't remember what it is, but anyway, he basically shoots himself in the foot by trying to kill the Blob, who is standing right next to the X-Men, and he says that the Blob has served his purpose, and then it doesn't work out for him because the Blob is immovable and is basically invulnerable, and when the X-Men are all hiding behind the Blob, and this missile, it doesn't kill the X-Men because it hits the Blob full on, then Magneto's plan doesn't really work. And interestingly, Magneto, he does say that he did not sense Professor Xavier's mental self anywhere near this battle, so somehow he knows that the Professor has abandoned the X-Men, so he is now going to plan accordingly for the next time that he tries to fight the X-Men. And again, we're seeing that Magneto does have some telepathic powers here that he had in the 60s, but does not have in later appearances in the 70s moving forward. But I don't know what he would have done differently in this issue if he had known that Professor X wasn't going to be there, because he acts like, well, Professor X wasn't there, so we'll definitely be able to win next time, but Professor X wasn't there this time, and you still didn't win. So I don't know what he plans to do differently the next time that we see the Brotherhood. But I will go ahead and give you a slight spoiler. Next issue, we will not be seeing the Brotherhood. We've been seeing them a lot lately. I think this is like the... maybe the fourth issue in a row that we've seen the Brotherhood in some way. We had the first appearance of the Brotherhood, and that was actually a two-parter, so there was 2 issues there, and then I guess we had the Namor issue and this issue. So I think this is the 4th appearance of the Brotherhood straight, so it will be nice to get a little bit of a break from them. I like the Brotherhood. I like their team dynamic. I actually think that their team dynamic is a little bit more interesting than the X-Men's team dynamic, at least at this point in time. We've had a lot of series set during the Silver Age period for the X-Men. We had Children of the Atom by Joe Casey and I want to say Steve Rude maybe, and then we had there was a series in the 90s that was basically just retelling these 60s issues but in a slightly updated format. We've had X-Men Season 1. We had that one series by Jeff Parker. I cannot remember the name of it. X-Men First Class, that was it. We've had a lot of series that focus on the Silver Age adventures of the X-Men, but told in a more modern way. I think it would be kind of cool if we had maybe an original graphic novel or a mini-series that focuses on the Brotherhood of the 1960s. If we could see what they were up to while they were fighting the X-Men and in between fights with the X-Men, we could see that the Toad, he is doing something to try and please Magneto, and maybe it backfires, and then Magneto backhands him and punts him across the room, and then Mastermind, he's scheming against Magneto, and he wants to get with Scarlet Witch, and she's not interested, and then Quicksilver can be over here looking out the window thinking about how he doesn't really want to be part of this team, but he has to because Scarlet Witch is here. It would be really interesting to see a book that kind of delves into the characters and their conflicts with each other while they're still working together, but they don't work well together. I think that would be really cool. I really like the Brotherhood in the 60s. I just think that giving us 4 issues in a row where we're kind of getting the same thing over and over again might have been a little bit of a mistake. Now, we do get a new villain next issue, but I think maybe they could have spread out these Brotherhood appearances a little bit, maybe given us this new villain in between one of these 4 appearances of the Brotherhood. But that's not going to be a problem next issue, like I said. So anyway, I don't think that I have anything else to say about this issue. This is a step up from last issue. I am looking forward to reading some of these issues coming up, looking at what Professor X is up to right now, and seeing if the X-Men can handle things without his help. This is, I would say, maybe the first step that these creators had in trying to shake things up with the X-Men, because you hear them talk about all the time why they canceled the series with issue 66 and had the series go into reprints for 5 years. They did that because of sales, and I don't know how far back the low sales went, but you can look at these early issues in the 60s, and you can see a lot of attempts to shake things up in these early issues, and they did like 4 or 5 things to try and do something new to get people interested in reading this series. And I'm wondering if having Professor X leave the team and leave Cyclops in charge, if that's not the first example of them trying to shake things up, or if it's just, hey, we have this cool idea for Professor X, so we're going to do this little thing that's going to last a few issues. I'm leaning towards that because we don't see the next example of them trying to shake things up again for a little while. It's going to be at least 10 more issues before we see something like that, maybe even a little longer than that. But anyway, I like this issue. I think this is an improvement over what we have seen. And also, the Iceman, he is looking a little different. I hadn't really noticed this, but I want to say that this is kind of, his appearance has been changing since Chick Stone started inking the book, but he doesn't look as much like a snowman as he did in the early issues when Paul Reinman was inking. And we will see, I'll go ahead and spoil this, but in next issue, we will see that he permanently goes from the snow look to more of an ice look, which is what he's known for now. But in this issue and the previous issue at least, I've been noticing that he doesn't quite look as much like a snowman as he did, but in the next issue when they actually draw attention to him changing his appearance so that it's a coating of ice around his body and not just a coating of snow. So that was something that I thought I'd go ahead and bring up since I was starting to notice it here, and then I was realizing that it's been a change that's been kind of in the works for at least 1 issue, maybe 2. But anyway, those are my thoughts on X-Men issue 7. I hope that you guys liked this video and consider this issue examined.